Hello and welcome to Comfort Legacies with Fay Michelle. Today we have our lovely guest, Mr. Kevin, here, and he's going to tell us a little bit about himself. So, hello, how are you doing?
I am doing just fine. I am doing just fine. And thank you for this opportunity in order to meet the great Miss Fay Michelle, Comfort Legacy. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Kevin, tell us about your book, The Indispensable Game.
I'm going to try to make a very long story very short, but it's going to be a long story that can't be short because there's a story to be told. Third grade, I woke up just like any 8 or 9 year old, had breakfast with the family, got up that morning, went to school, did all the things a third grader would do, came home that evening, put the key in the lock, opened the door, and my world changed. I discovered that my mother had relocated herself to Beverly Hills 90120, had also taken the pastor of our church with her. She left behind me and my seven brothers and sisters. My father systematically created an atmosphere where he had a better relationship with a bottle and relocated us to his childhood home, my grandparents' home, where he was raised, and that's where I was raised. He lost our home at 559 Cedarhurst, and even though that I had a well-balanced childhood, religious-based family, I had made some choices from third grade to the eighth grade that probably was not in the alignment of the education I was receiving at home. And it wasn't until one afternoon when one of my neighbors had been robbed by a street gang on his paper route. We found the guy, defended him, and back then you had street justice. It wasn't like it is now. You didn't get shot in the head or anything like that. Coming towards the end of the summer, entering my freshman year of high school, we had that last eighth grade summer party. I don't know how old you are, but it used to be down in the parents' basement. There was a blue light, not a red light. The boys stood in one corner, the girls stood on the floor, looking at the boys, wishing they would come over. We didn't have enough nerves to do so. And downstairs came, entered four individuals, which one face was familiar with me, and I was familiar with that individual. He approached me. We had a couple exchange of not so personal words. He put his chest out, I put my chest out, and I said, well, we had done it once, we can do it again. So Vanessa Birdsong said, not at my mama's house. If you're not doing this, tearing up my mama's house, you gotta take that outside. So you know what it is with families of color. So we decided to take it outside. So when my arms were free of my coat, balled up my fist, ready to put it to him again. Unfortunately, they pulled out guns. At that time, me and a young man by the name of Paul Moore, we exited that situation, climbed over the neighborhood swimming pool's fence, hid into one of the rooms that during the summer, I had fantasized about being in a girl's bathroom, not realizing that what I was laying in could have either been H2O or DNA. Not 100% sure, but all I could do is hear the chips of the concrete falling around me. Knowing that we only had one exit, either to go back over the wall that we came over or exit the opposite side, I took off and exited the opposite side because I did not want to get pinned down into a room that I couldn't get out of. I learned two things that night. One, I had world-class speed and didn't know it. The other, I wanted to live more than I wanted to die. I made a promise to myself if I got home without any bullets, holes in my body, that I was going to change my life. And at that time, I chose different friends. I chose a different path, and I kept my promise to God. Entered freshman high school at Dayton Roosevelt, one of the most dynamic high schools in the city of Dayton. Anybody that was an athlete, anyone that had any gift, came to that school. Lucinda Adams was an Olympic gold medalist that ran with Wilma Rudolph on the 4x4 relay in the Olympics, was one of my track coaches.
Wow.
I sat in the gym room with the girls on one side of the bleachers, the boys on the other side. Coach Russo walked in while he was reading off roll, and he says with a very thick Italian accent, how many of the young men were going to go out for football? Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know if he was talking to me, but I know every other young man kind of raised up his hand like this. All right, like I'm looking at you right now. I looked over and saw Pam Jones. Pam Jones had long hair just like you. She had beautiful brown eyes, just like you. She had a smile just like you. And I'm looking over and I'm kind of reading Pam's mind. And she says, if you go out for football, I'll be there at every game to watch you. And like every
Wow.
little boy, I slowly raised up my hand like, sure, you're right, Pam. I'll be there. So 2 weeks went by and I came home and one lie turned into a bigger lie. Told my father that I was on the Roosevelt High School freshman football team.
Hmm.
I went 2 weeks, did not realize that playing football meant you got sweaty, dirty, and you came home sore and complaining every day. I came home like there was nothing wrong. Changed my
Oh no.
into my running shorts until that one afternoon I came home and my father was there with Big John Williams, his best friend. Did not know that Big John Williams had a son that played on the freshman football team. My father offered to give me a ride. I denied. I said, Dad, I'm good. I'll make it to practice. He said, what time you got to be there? I had no idea what time practice happened. He says, I'm going to give you a ride. So I'm going to run. And he says, no, it's 5 miles. You can't get to football practice on time. And I said, boy, I backed myself into a corner.
Hmm.
Into my father's Chevy Impala. He drove down with Big John Williams in the passenger seat, me in the back. And by the time that we pulled up the corner and I saw Gracie Green, I saw two sets of football players, one the varsity, one the freshman on two different fields. And I saw one familiar face, Coach Russo. Before my father hit the brakes, wheels are still rolling. I hopped out of the car, ran down the hill to the practice squad, and I basically said, Mr. Russo, hey, two things in my household my father does not like, liars and thief. And he says, right now, I'm guilty of both. I said, I told my father that I was on the football team. So my father and Big John stood at the hill. Coach Russo turned around, looked up at my dad. To this very day, I knew there was a conversation that had been had that I had not been privy to. Coach
Oh,
Russo nodded his head, said, go over there. And from that day on, my life changed. I became a member of the mighty Teddy's varsity football team. So one lie turned into finding out within the first chapter of discovering who you are. So each chapter of the book basically is all about your choices. And through the
mm,
experience of my life, and I think I told you in Clubhouse, this was a long story being told since 1973 to March 1st, 2000, this is 2019, the last
mm.
entry into my high school journal. Did not realize on March 1st in 2019 that I was going to suffer a major concussion. That concussion led for me for 3 to 4 weeks that I had no recollection of my life. My memory was like wiped clean. The way that I describe it, my concussion was like watching the Matrix. You know, when you see those little ticker top things or whatever, my head is actually mush. If I get backed up into a corner, I start to stutter. If I'm thinking too fast or trying to spell a word or have a conversation, I have to kind of look back to see if the words are actually in my head. And sometimes I can't get my mouth and my head to connect. So, you know, I understand people that live with a concussion and what they go through is totally different. But it's amazing that 3 weeks, I think 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I was left to my own in the house where my family all returned to work and back to their life. And I started to explore my own home, walked into my office, and I had this laptop that we're looking at right now doing this call. I opened it up and normally have to put a password, not that day. And it had a file, it said Kevin's Files. Clicked on the icon, opened it up, it said everything I needed to learn about life. I learned playing high school football. It was my high school journal from 1973 to March 1st, the last entry of 2019 of every event, every
Oh, wow.
tragedy, every conquest in my life, every story that I had to tell was all there. And I had just started to transpose that manuscript into a book form. So it took me a couple of days to read it, and I suffered because I was sensitive to light and sound. I walked into the room with my wife, asked her, showed her the computer. I said, do you know who wrote this? And she says, looked at me and goes, you did. I said, I did. I said, this made me laugh. It made me cry. And I said, it made me think and want to fight and beat this disease. I said, I'm not going to let this concussion break me. And from that day to the day my book got published, that's how Indispensable Games of X's and O's, how I learned everything about life. I learned playing high school football was created. and now is out in the world. It's on Audible Book. It's on Amazon, and you get it from me. And I'm available for book signings, conversations about the books. And my book is all about choices. And that's what life is about. The choices you make and the actions that follow those choices.
Wow. Okay. Now, where are you calling this from?
I am in King of Prussia. I'm 25 minutes outside of Philadelphia. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, and I've lived in every city in Ohio except for Toledo. I've been fortunate enough to have a tryout on a NFL football team. I was the unofficial strength coach for Major League Baseball, thanks to Julio Franco, the Cleveland Indians. I was lucky enough in order to get a job on a soap opera called One Life to Live. And from there, I went to Guiding Light. I've been in a Woody Allen film. I've been in a Mark Wahlberg film. I've been on the cover of Harlequin Romance. I am now one of the top fitness professionals at Lifetime Fitness on the East Coast. And I am just living the dream. And I'm very happy to be part of this segment of your journey to your legacy. And I'm just thankful and grateful that, I am still here.
That is awesome. And I thank you for all of them. Great accolades. Now, you mentioned that you were hit in the head? Is that why you had your amnesia? What happened with that?
Well, I don't know if it's amnesia, it just cleared my head. I was
It
training
cleared
a
your
client.
head?
It cleared matter of fact, the nice thing about having a concussion is that your memory is sketchy. I got hit in the head, in the temple, with a barbell while I was training someone else. There was someone else behind me. So people that, you know how like you run into people, you go, oh, I haven't seen you in ages or whatever. The people that are important are people that are etched in my memory. The people that were not present in my life, I kind of forgot. I mean, it's still, I went to a funeral a year ago, and some of my classmates and teammates I didn't recognize, and I had to ask, and it was emotional for me because I didn't know how to articulate exactly what was going on, or how, when they recognize me and goes, I haven't seen you in years, whatever, and I'm going, I have no idea who you are. And I asked a young lady by the name of Sharon Caldwell, I said, look, told her about my injury, and I said, I honestly don't have a lot of memory of unless what I read in high school. I said, I want to know one thing. I said, was I a good guy when I was growing up? And Sharon says, oh, McLemore. She goes, you were this Southern gentleman. You were always one of the people who said, you and this guy named Mark Brown, it's like all of us. She goes, I'm gay, and I even was attracted to you. She said, you were just a perfect gentleman. And I just, and I still live my life wanting to make sure that if I had ever wronged anyone, I am not the person I used to be. And even with a chapter in my book, I tell people constantly, it's like you need to quit holding on to luggage that does not want to travel with you, because who you were yesterday, if you have done all of the work in order to change who you are today, that's the version of yourself that you need to present to the world, not the version of yourself when you had no control, no responsibility, and were just playing stupid. It's who you are today. And I think that's what we need to judge people by, is who we are presently. I mean, some of us have made humongous mistakes, and I've spoken to people that have just been incarcerated for years and that are trying to get their lives back together and are different people than the people they were today. And I keep saying, you've got to give these people a chance, because in human life, we have to value that presence. You can't just discard it because of choices, because, when we peel back the layers of everyone's life, I don't think there's any of us that doesn't have something in our background that we really don't want to see on a billboard while we're driving on the highway.
Yes, absolutely. Now, how did you publish your book? Was it through a traditional literary agency, or did you self-publish?
Well, this is funny. My first book was published through, that I'm going to say, the system. And the reason why I say the system, I wrote a book after having an injury to my knee and going to my vacation home in Bethany, that there were a group of people that's celebrating the birthday, big open fire on the beach or whatever, and they were celebrating the birthday of Elvis Presley. And I sat there and I listened to him, and I wrote a book called Letters to Elvis. Now, St. Martin's Press had no idea who I was. I had an agent, a book agent, presented the book. I got a very healthy advancement. And when I came in there to do all the PR stuff, to meet the team and talk about that, and when I walked in the room got silent. And when the room got silent, it was like, "You're Kevin McLemore?" "Yes, I am." They were not aware that I was a Black man writing about Elvis. And the biggest argument I have, and this is the reason why I say the system, and I talk about that in my book, is that they didn't want my picture on the cover of the book. And understanding that most people only get published once in their lifetime, if any, I said my picture is going to be someplace on that book. I had paid for a photographer, and my picture is going to be in the book. So Elvis is on the front with a little tear sheet says "Letter to Elvis." They have a little bitty picture of me leaning against the mailbox on the back of the page. That book, I did PR, I did TV, radio, back and forth. And when the book was supposed to be released, the UPS strike hit. So my book sat in the warehouse for a month and a half, almost 2 months. The Saturday morning that I got an announcement that the book was being released, Lady Diana was killed. So that book died before it had even given birth. So when I started to present this book, I went back to my original publisher to see if they would publish it. And they said because it was a motivational and inspirational book or self-help book, because I was not famous, they could not publish the book. And their suggestion was, when you get famous, come back to us. We would love to publish the book. And me, I got a college education, and I'm going, none of this makes any sense. Come back to you when I'm famous. I said, no, when I'm famous, I'm going to be talking about who passed up on this book. I went to Random House, and they told me because I was not famous, the same thing. So my editor found me a independent publisher called Lulu Publishing. We sat down, we talked, and I already had a little bit of an attitude going into it.
Yeah.
And they did publish my book. It was a lot of going back and forth, and the book almost didn't get published because originally the contents of the book was 93,000 words, and they wanted down to 92,000.
Wow.
We ended up with 53,000 words at the end of the book, and they wanted 52,000. But the big thing was chapter by chapter, paragraph by paragraph, they kept making suggestions for changes to the point that book wasn't my book anymore. I even had, to get an attorney to say that I had every right to publish my version of the book the way that I remembered it. And they were so worried about being sued. And it got to the point that I was going to back out. I was going to say, let the book die. They didn't want to do that. So we got over the content part of it and got that approved. And then we had an issue with the cover of the book. Cover of the book that they suggested looked like they had just taken stock lettering, put it there, and it looked like a crayon. It was a cheap paperback book, and I said, no, not doing it. And I knew that I was a personal friend with Les Brown. I had been in a room with Tony Robbins before and some other very successful speakers, and we know that the first introduction to anyone's mind that likes to read is that picture on the page. And I said, look, I'm going to give you 2 pictures. You pick which one you want. I said, but we're not going with the other one. Otherwise, I'm walking. And they picked that, and that's what happened. So, I always say that if you want to predict there's going to be a tragedy in the world, I said, let me publish a book. Because 2 days before the release, the world shut down for the pandemic. And I said, I'm a futurist. I can tell the future,
Wow.
And lucky for me, the book opened doors for me to be a social activist. I picked up where my mother left off when she marched with Martin Luther King and had Action Incorporated in Dayton, Ohio. So I spoke at a couple of rallies, and my message was to create allyships. Because when you look at the fact that people of color only represent 13% of this population, we do not have a seat at the table. So it's almost impossible for our voices to be heard if we don't have an economic position to whereas people are paying attention to us. So in order for us to do that, we have to create alliedships with people that are not as light or dark as we are, that share our same beliefs, that embrace our story, and they stand with us, that fight with us instead of against us. And that was my message. And trying to get people to understand what was going on with the protests. And I put it very simple. It's just like a relationship. When the husband comes home, the wife is sideways about something. Her conversation at that time is the peaceful protest. She's trying to find a resolution to solve a problem so they can move on. In the event that your husband or your better half ignores that and he placates you, he says, yes, I'll do better the next time, but he continues to repeat the same process. What happens is that's when you start to riot. That riot means sleeping on the couch. That riot means throwing out some of the things that you were close to, shutting down romance in your life. And then when you see the looting and so forth, which I do not condemn, is the fact that let me show you what I need to do in order to get your attention. That's when you kind of, rub your keys down to the side of a shiny little car. You take the baseball bat to all four windows, and it doesn't become a hit country song. It becomes reality. And that's what people need to understand. What they see, what they read, and what they hear is basically predicated on two things: your interpretation and your perspective. And when you do not acknowledge that what we are going through as people of color to be real, then you watch Fox News.
Yes. And that sums it up. Watch Fox News. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Well, my goodness, it has been great. So, with all of that being said, I usually ask, what did it feel like to get that book in your hand once you finished it? But since you've had two experiences, what was that like? I mean, on either case.
Well, I will tell you, having the book in my hand was not as important as it was when my youngest son had the book in hand and he posted it on his social media page. Now, I'm trying not to get emotional, is that when you have a 24-year-old man that is 6'4", has an afro out to here, that tells you that you're his hero and he's your son, the book was worth it. And I wrote the book to make sure that it was another child that was in an environment that seemed hopeless, was in an arena where you were not the gladiator, you were the prey, like most of our inner city kids are. Is that I wanted to create hope. If you look at my bio on Clubhouse, you look at the podcast network I'm creating, we use HOPE as an acronym of helping other people every day. I wanted to make sure that this book, and my ultimate goal is to have my book in every public high school and every middle school library across the country. And because of my partner that is part of the inclusion program of Burlington Public School District, my book is going to be part of their curriculum. So
wow.
There's one down, 49 states to go. So I'm looking for relationships with people that want to partner, that want to hear my story. I'm looking for sponsors that want to help put my book into schools. And I'm looking to make sure that I have a conversation with a child that says that, no, this is all I got. This neighborhood, this is all I got. And I want to show that kid there's a whole nother world out there with a lot of opportunities and a lot better choices. You got to put in the time, you got to do the work, but if you can dream it, you can bring it into reality. And that's what my book's all about, making changes through your choices.
That is awesome. I heard you talk about that yesterday. So any final words you would like to give to anybody out there that perhaps is interested in starting or wanting to do a book?
Don't ask yourself, how do I write a book? Where do I get started? Every book starts and ends the same way. It starts with putting a pen to paper with the first word and the last word. The key thing is you got to believe that you have a story to tell, and you got to believe that of 241 million people that are in the United States and 8 billion that's on the planet, that your story is going to resonate but at least 1% of that population. And if you can get your book in the hands of 1% of the population and make a difference and change those people's minds and the way they look at life, you're a very successful published author, regardless if you go through traditional publishing or self-publishing, you are successful.
Wow, well, that is awesome. If it changes one life, like you said, the whole thing about your son just making a difference to you was very impactful for him.
Yeah.
Wow, that is awesome. Well, Mr. Kevin, I appreciate your time today. I'm so excited to have you here and love your story. And it is on Audible because you read the Audible yourself, right?
No, I actually, because of COVID and because of like being in this room, I started to read it. I spent $3,000 on recording equipment, but every single time I recorded it, because I didn't know how to edit or anything, I was always picking up street noise, whatever. Did not understand how powerful $300 mic was, thanks to Rose, and what it would pick up. It would literally pick up my dog throwing his bone away in 2 rooms away, even though I tried to soundproof it. So I connected with a guy out in New York that sounded like me, that looked like me, and portions of the book, he read a large portion of it, and then I spent 2 weekends reading it with him in his studio. So I give him credit for reading the book. There's some outtakes in the book of just like the conversation we're having right now, because a large portion of the book was left on the table, just like any movie. You know, scenes get cut from it. So you know, when you meet me in real life, the 93,000 word story is that I will fill in the gap from there, because my story is like a movie. It's like if you've seen the movie Cooley, you'll have some idea of my story. I've already been told it should be a movie. And then I have a Christmas book called Sprinkles, the True Spirit of Christmas. That's basically about being kind to people and chasing your dreams. So everything that I do from sun up to sundown is positive. You know, if you want to adapt a hashtag, find 1,000 reasons to be kind to someone. If you want to adapt a tagline, you know, when you get to a position, and this is my grandfather's thing, it's not original, so I can't take credit. When you get to a position and you can help someone else, my grandfather always said it's your duty to do so. And he said, reach one, teach one. And that's Kevin.
Each one teaches one. That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate it and all your wisdom, and I wish you much success and health and wellness. I know you were down a little bit, and you're doing all right. Doing all right now.
I am doing so good. I am blessed. I can't wait to you know, hear the feedback from your listeners and your fans. Hopefully I've changed the direction of someone's thoughts in the way they looked at the world, and I hope I motivated, you know, someone to turn the pages of a book and share my story.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank
and
you.
We will talk again.
My queen. All right. Thank you.